Hey everybody, this is Mark Zweig, and I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of Big Talk About Small Business. I don't have my partner, Eric Howerton, in the studio today. I guess he's on some exotic vacation or doing something like that. Eric lives a life of leisure, along with about 10 businesses. But I do have a very special guest here in the studio with me today. This is one of my former students, Nick Kilgore, and Nick and his brother Chris have a car business, which the name of it is Market Auto. Is that not right, Nick?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, Nick, tell us a little bit, just to give you an idea where Nick is. Nick, what are you, about 22, 23?
I just turned 23.
Okay, just turned 23. You graduated from U of A, what, in...
this last spring. Spring of 23.
Okay, great. And just to give you guys a little bit of background, Nick comes from a great family here. They are entrepreneurs. They own multiple businesses and have had all kinds of things, both parents and grandparents. His grandfather's a friend of mine who is a very interesting guy. He's a real character who was a Methodist minister, was a test driver for tires on a truck, has bought and sold businesses. A very interesting character. Everybody knows your grandpa around this town, Bob Cantrell.
Yeah, he was a pilot as well.
Yeah.
Crazy story. He actually built his own gyrocopter and then chose to actually fly it. So
that'll give you an idea about what Bob's like. So Nick and his brother Chris. Is Chris your little brother or older brother?
No, he's older. He's 5 years older than me.
Okay, I never knew that.
Yeah.
I never asked. I've only met Chris in the last 6 months or so. But so Nick and his older brother Chris have a used car business, Market Auto. How did you get into this business?
Well, so initially, my brother and my dad, they kind of started doing that whenever I was in, junior high. They started selling cars, and I had my brother had always sold phones. That was kind of his thing. Like, he'd fix them up and sell them. Like, and
really?
Whenever he was a little kid, he would just. I mean, I'm talking like 8 years old, starting out. He would try to buy broken phones off of people, or just have them bring their broken phones to him, and he'd fix them. And then he would buy some of the broken ones that people didn't want to get fixed, and he'd actually sell them on Craigslist. And
that's wild.
He did pretty well with that, like all the way through high school. And, he moved into other tech and stuff. And then he started just kind of jumping into cars. And everyone in my family is super passionate about cars, except for maybe my mom. But it's just like we all just enjoy driving. And ever since I was little, the only reason, I always wanted to make money, but the end goal was always to make money to buy cars, more or less. So I never
Been
really
there. I understand that.
I didn't really care about getting it for any other reason. So that was kind of the end goal. And so once I got in, I think I was like 14. I started tagging along to the auctions with them, and I had saved up a little bit of money because ever since I was little, my dad had always told me, it's like, hey, you better start saving now because I'm not going to buy you a car. And he knew that obviously that's something I was interested in. So
sure.
He's like, you just better save every penny you can. So I'd saved up like some money. And at some point, whenever I was younger, I was trading stock, which is a weird thing to be doing whenever you're like 14. But
that's smart.
I wasn't doing well with it. I did well for a while, and then I kind of put it in the penny stuff, and that didn't go so well. And so I lost most of that, but I had like $1,000 saved up, and went to the auction, went and bought a cheap car, and I just sell that, and I never touch the money, and I just roll it continually. And I did that all throughout high school. And once I got into college, I was doing it a little bit here and there, but I'd mostly tied up all that in just like what I was driving at the time. And
well, you had a 911 cabriolet, so obviously you worked your way up the car automotive food chain.
Well, I think I paused around. So I when I was in high school, I bought an M3, a BMW M3, and that was what I tied all that up in, and I kept that for a couple years. But then when I started flipping again, basically I'd sold that car, bought something a little cheaper, a little Porsche Boxster, and I drove that around. But I had some money left over, and I was putting that into stock again, which at the time was doing really well, which not so much anymore. But the
market's back up again now.
Yeah, not for me, but maybe
you got to stay in. The whole key to stock investing is don't take your money out.
I think where mine's located right now, I don't think it's going anywhere but down. But that being said, it's still there. It's just, where it's just not a small fraction.
Sure.
But no, I just started flipping again a little bit, and then towards the end of school, you actually presented me that and it was someone I knew, Robert Parker, was moving out of his location, and I knew of it. I knew him. I'd met him a couple times through the auctions and stuff, and we bought and sold some cars through and with him.
Sure, he knew your dad, and Barry knows your dad.
Absolutely, and so Mark had presented me the opportunity to take over the lease essentially, and at the time I was kind of just like, dude, I don't know how I'm gonna finance this, because at the time I'd been doing everything in cash. Anything I was flipping, it was purely cash, and most of the time I was registering vehicles. Like, I didn't have a dealer's license personally, so I would just register the car.
Jeez, and your brother and dad didn't even let you tag on theirs?
Oh, no, they'd help me out with that.
Okay.
Early on, I was doing that a bit more, but later on, I wasn't running the same volumes I was whenever I was in high school, so I just register it for like a month, drive it around, and sell it just to make a quick profit and have a little bit of fun with it, because I always buy stuff I like whenever it was, personal.
Where did you find the cars that you bought?
A lot of them, well, back in the day, it was Craigslist. Some of them I'd get at auction, like I was saying, I would tag along with them. But a lot of the cars, probably Facebook Marketplace, after that became more of a big thing.
Yeah, it's replaced Craigslist. Totally.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, whenever I was little, I because of cars, and I used to, sometimes I'd host meets and stuff, and, I'd go to all the car meets. So I knew everyone in that community. And so I had a lot of friends that were actually in positions to buy some of the stuff that I was eyeballing, and I'd always look at stuff I couldn't afford. So I'd get on all these websites, and I'd be just, looking at $200,000 cars, and I'd go and find the best deals on them, and I'd hunt every site, and I'd just scour the U.S. for these things. And I'd end up finding stuff that my friends would then, people that I knew would end up picking up just because I was like, hey, this is a really good deal. Yeah. And sometimes they would be close enough to where I was like, I could weasel my brother into it and be like, hey man, you should go in with me on this. And, we'd do stuff like that here and there. But it was just purely for fun, honestly. I mean, and I knew that I obviously I did it to make a profit, but also it's just an excuse to buy stuff that I already wanted to mess around with. So
I was the same way. So, I mean, I totally understand it. That's part of the reason why I've had over 400 cars is when I was younger, I just buy them all the time and sell.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just fun working on them too. And I mean, just seeing it come together. One of the most satisfying things for me is
improving them.
Yeah, picking something up. I love buying them when they're dirty, because if you buy a dirty car, a lot of times you get a better deal on it.
No kidding.
People look at it and they're like, "Oh, this thing looks dingy," and it's like you spend a couple hours cleaning it up, and it makes a massive difference.
I tell everybody, clean your car before you go trade it in. You'll always get more for it if they think they can just stick it right on the lot.
No, absolutely. And
so yeah, you follow the market. That's, just like any business. You make money when you're buying, and you make money when you're selling. You got to know what something's worth and be able to buy it for less than that.
No, absolutely.
That comes with familiarity, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think that that was probably one of the biggest factors that's helped me in this business, is just the fact that, at least for the stuff I'm buying, I already know the market. It's like, I know what it should be worth, and usually I can eyeball it, and just, obviously I have my books and stuff. I have resources to use to value these things. But a lot of times those aren't incredibly accurate, especially with some of the more niche stuff. So, for example, whenever I went to go sell my M3, it was a 58,000 mile E46 M3, and it was really crazy color and super rare car at that mileage. And everyone would, message me whenever I listed it who didn't know what they were talking about, and they're like, oh, well, Kelly Blue Book is this. And I'm like, dude, it's one of 202 in that color. It's got 58,000 miles. It's just...
I'm not going to give this away.
I ended up getting a decent amount of money out of it. But I was cracking up at some of that stuff because, I mean, you know, you're always going to get that. And you're always going to get the people that just message you specifically to tell you that you're either overpriced or...
I know, it's
tell
like,
you
get a life. Why don't you?
Yeah, well,
I never understood that.
You got to wonder sometimes, like, what was the purpose of doing all that? But no, back to like how we got started with the actual business. So essentially, Mark presented me with the opportunity. He told me that Parker was wanting to move out of his lease, and so I kind of sat on that for a minute, and I was like, you know, I really would like to do this. I think this is a really good opportunity. But at the time, I didn't even know about floor plans or any other ways that I, as someone with very little credit and very young, not a ton of money to my name, could, you know, essentially stock that lot and keep up with the burn rate.
Right.
That's basically. So
the burn rate being the overhead you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. So like the rent and then whatever the other associated costs are with actually, you know, keeping the lights on and whatnot.
But I don't mean to interrupt you, Nick, but I think what this was, these kinds of opportunities are out there if people keep their eye open for them. This was an established business for 40 years at one location where you're basically paying nothing for the business, and it's got a history there. That's a long history.
No, absolutely.
And so if people can get those kinds of opportunities to take over existing businesses that have gone out of business, and this one hadn't gone out of business, but it was going to, essentially. Parker's son-in-law, he didn't want to be in it any longer. Those are some good opportunities for people.
Oh, no doubt. And I mean, so basically what ended up happening with that was that Margaret asked me, he's like, do you want to do this? I'm like, I want to, but I can't figure out how I'm going to fund it, more or less. And at the time, I wish I'd known more about certain other ways of getting capital that I was unaware of in that particular market, like floor planning and stuff like that. But so I basically turned it down, and then I get a phone call about a week later, and Mark had told me he was going to pass it on to someone else. Well, I had no idea that someone else was a friend of mine. I was actually someone I'd known from hosting meets and stuff back in the day, Ryan Malone. And I get a phone call from Chris, and he's like, hey, Ryan just called me, and he's wondering if I wanted to do this dealership thing with him, and I was wondering if you wanted to do it with me. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we kind of came to some terms on, you know, how we were going to, basically he was going to be primarily the capital guy.
Right.
And we were going to be the just
operators.
Yeah, run it.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, we already know how to do that. Chris already had a dealer's license and everything. And even though it was small, they had an established dealership, even though maybe a 3 to 5 car lot at the very most. I mean, you're cramming it out at 5. I mean, they had more cars, but they'd keep them off to the side and keep them tucked away.
Yeah.
But
behind your grandma's building there.
Yeah. Right. Either that or they were parked at my parents' house. Sometimes I'd keep cars parked over at my house.
Yeah.
This is a whole tangent of itself. But one time my mom got so irritated that my brother was parking cars at her house that they got into an argument about getting it out. It was an old Mercedes SL, and it was bashed in the front. It was undrivable. It was sitting on a trailer in their yard. And I'm just sitting there at the kitchen table listening to my dad, my mom,
in a nice neighborhood, right?
Yeah. I'm just sitting there listening to my parents and my brother argue about this car and him getting it out of there. And I got sick of hearing it, and I said, let me just buy it. I'll go put it at my house. I'm tired of hearing this. And so I bought the car from him for like what he had in it. He kept the hard top. So that's the profit for him, because hard tops they're pretty expensive. And I ended up, I mean, it was cheap. It was like, I paid him like $200 for it. And
wow, that is a cheap
I moved it in a week though. I listed it for like $500 and had a guy come pick it up and needed a motor and got it rolled. But I didn't have it too long, but I just remember bringing it home one day and my roommates were like, hey, why is there a wrecked Mercedes in the yard? I'm like, don't worry about it. I'll get it gone.
That is, I mean, you sound like me when I was in college. I always sold cars out of my front yard.
Oh yeah.
And when I was in high school, I brought home, I had two 55 Fords. I had one that was a show car that I redid completely, and I parked it in my mom and dad's garage and wouldn't let them park their cars in there. Well, needless to say, when Thanksgiving came, my first year of college, my dad calls me up and says, "Hey, son." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Get your blankety blank car out of my garage. I need to park in it." I parked it in the middle so they couldn't door ding it.
Oh my gosh.
That didn't fly. But no, I had that car. Then I had a 55 Ford two-door wagon that we were going to turn into a hot rod, and that was parked alongside my mom's house. And when I brought home a third 55 Ford, parked it in the garage, ripped the seats out looking for change, which was always the first thing we did whenever we bought a used car.
Yeah.
My mom started crying. I mean, I've only seen her cry like 3 times her whole life, okay? Another old car, you know. So I can identify with you. Yeah.
Yeah, my mom has certainly had her share of grievances with the stuff that we end up bringing home.
I'll bet. So anyway, you and Chris teamed up on this deal with Ryan, the late Ryan Malone, who's also was a guest on this show shortly before he died.
Yeah. You know, I didn't know him too well going into it. Like I'd met him more than a few times, and I knew everyone he knew, which is kind of one of those weird things that happens whenever you're just in all those circles. And so you feel like you know someone just because you know everyone around them.
Yeah.
To a certain degree.
Yeah.
I hadn't really sat down with him too much. So, you know, we sat down, we had some meetings, and, you know, just discussed some terms of what we were going to do and everything. And, and, you know, just started hanging out a little bit more and quickly became friends. He was just one of those people that, you know, you couldn't not like him.
Everybody loved Ryan.
One of the nicest guys I've ever met. And
he really was
super helpful. And I mean, anything that we were trying to fix, because I mean, we understood like the dealership side, we understood the car side, but the filing, you know, doing everything for getting it ready with as far as taxes are concerned, EIN number, LLC formation, all that.
Right.
That was Ryan. So Ryan, he knew his way around businesses, and that was a huge part of the reason we wanted to work with him to be in.
Sure.
Just because, I mean, he knew exactly what he was talking about whenever it came to that. And
well, he knew a lot about cars, and he had a good network too.
Oh, yeah.
Like he would have, you know, put some of his expensive stuff through there, which would upgrade your image.
Oh, and
you know, all the Lambos and Ferraris and stuff that he liked.
And I mean, it never hurts to have a passion for it too.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. And that was another huge reason I wanted to work with him, is just because, I mean, it's something, if I'm, you know, I would want someone to be very passionate in that business, to want to work with me in that business.
He knew a lot about cars. I mean, Ryan would buy those Lamborghinis. I think the last one he bought, well, before this one that he was killed in, he bought one. I don't know that he ever even picked it up. He told me he made like $27,000 or something on the car. He bought it. It was sitting at his buddy's place in St. Louis, the dealership, and somebody came along and offered more for it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard that story.
No, I didn't.
That was just the kind of stuff Ryan did all the time. Everything he did, he turned to gold.
Oh, absolutely.
He was a real operator.
No, he knew what he was doing, and he knew how to do it in a way that everyone ended up happy too. Mm-hmm. It's like never heard
any ill will, because he was just a great guy. He would always do, like, he would go the extra yard.
No, absolutely.
You know? He's one of those guys that whenever you went out to lunch or dinner with him, he paid.
Yeah.
You know, and he would fight you on allowing you to pay. I mean, it's really unusual. Very generous guy.
No, definitely. But yeah, no, we were open for, I mean, when we first started out, man, it was killing me, because, you know, here we are starting out with 0 cars on the lot, and so we have to stock this, and, you know, it's a lot larger operation than what I was used to. Sure. So we were running to all the auctions and stuff, and all the headaches that come with that, you know, just driving around all over the place, going to pick stuff up. And I'm granted, there's still a lot of that, but whenever you have to secure all that volume all at once, it's a little bit different than replenishing it as you go.
Sure, exactly.
So when we first started out, I mean, it was rough. Like we were all over the place trying to pick stuff up, and, you know, sometimes you get a good one, sometimes you get one that maybe you get a little unlucky on or something. Then obviously the market's been a little bit weird past couple months in general. I mean, the last 2 years, used cars as a whole
They went
shot
crazy.
up, which is unheard of.
Now they're starting to go back down again.
Oh yeah, and it's come down pretty fast.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Every so often, my wife's got to get something new, like every 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And so I'll submit those Carfax, or not Carfax. Who are the people that buy, that
Carvana?
Carvana.
I do that too.
Yeah. So I'll submit her car to Carvana, and then they'll give me a price. And I've never sold them anything. They came close one time.
Yeah.
But so all these cars that I ever submitted there, they keep sending me emails on them, and I'm just watching the pricing just dropping like a stone out there. So
oh no, I get the same thing. It's funny. It's funny you say that. Sometimes this is a little habit I picked up on whenever I'm actually looking for inventory. Is if I'm on a website, say like Backlot, or I think it's called Open Car Buyers now. They changed the name recently.
This is one for dealers you're talking about.
Yeah. It's a dealer site, but
right.
Whenever I get on the site, sometimes if I see a car that looks like something we could buy, but might be a little bit hard to move quickly, and looks like a good price, I'll just ballpark the price based off what Carvana will pay. So I'll just go and I'll send it in like I'm trying to sell it to them.
I see.
And if that number comes up higher, then I know there's money to be made.
Good point. Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Because I mean, they're buying it for to sell at a profit.
Right.
So if they're willing to pay more than what I can pay, I mean, shoot, I'd be happy even if I only make a couple $100 or $1,000 on a car, whatever it might be. Right. I'd be more than happy to turn in the same day.
Sure, of course.
Profit's profit,
Yeah. So, I mean, but isn't it risky buying these vehicles at auctions and online? I mean,
oh, very.
I mean, I know you can do things like run Carfaxes on them to find out what the history is, but it's not always accurate.
I'll tell you what in my opinion, what the least risky way to do it is actually buying it online.
Is it? Why is that?
So if you go to an auction and you actually test drive a car, let's say, and you do your due diligence, you look it over, whatnot. I don't know if it's I wouldn't say it's the least risky, but it's it feels less risky to me, specifically because of their arbitration policies. So let's say you go to an auction, you go test drive a car, you're test driving it in their lot in a designated area, you have maybe 100 yards to accelerate it, you can get through. Depending on if it's manual or automatic, you can get through maybe 1, 2, 3 gears, right?
Right.
So you get up maybe 40 miles an hour at the very most. And sometimes issues don't show up at 40 miles an hour. Whereas you buy a car on, say, one of these auction sites, they go and they run their own inspection on it, and they give you little check marks on everything they've tested, and they tell you exactly, what should be working, and tell you what's not supposed to be working.
Right.
Now, if those two things don't match up and they had specified that works and you get the car and that
they have some liability there.
Exactly. And so they're going to end up paying for that, or they're going to buy the car back.
Right.
Whereas a lot of the auctions, their arbitration policies just aren't very great. We had one day, and I mean, I don't even want to think about this day. We had one day where we bought 3 cars. Every single one of them had a bad transmission.
Wow.
And it's like, you couldn't tell. One of them was just a mistake on our part. We bought it without test driving it. It was dirt cheap, and it rolled through the line. It looked like it was driving okay, and I can't take responsibility for this one. I didn't buy it. But
Chris,
but we picked that up, and it was a little RAV4, so we're waiting on it. That's been a headache of itself, but because we've gone through 2 transmissions. I guess it might be a computer issue actually, because we put in 2 and still is not working. So I'm thinking maybe ECU. But we had that, and then we had a Ford F-150 that we did test drive, and everything ran great on the lot. Turns out 4th gear is gone. So their arbitration policy doesn't cover that. Exactly. You can't get it into 4th on the lot. We test drove it, looked it over, everything looked good. And you get it out on the road, and it goes 3, and then it just basically skips 4 or slams into it, whatever it wants to do at that time. So that's a full rebuild. And then we had a Tahoe that just, it felt fine. I mean, it drove fine, but it was just only when it was cold you could feel it was kind of a little bit almost vibrating. It turns out it's a torque converter, and so we had to get that replaced and stuff. So it's just, sometimes you can't tell just based on driving them, but it's really nice to have that assurance whenever you have an arbitration policy that lists out the things that.
And this is auctions you're talking about that do that, or online sources?
The online sources are the ones that do the inspections.
I see.
The auctions, they don't really inspect them. They only inspect them if you send it to arbitration and it's something that's covered under their policy, because they're very specific as to what they cover.
Okay, when you say online, you're talking about these online wholesale sources.
Yeah.
That the average person does not have access to. Is that right?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, if you're buying a car from, say, Facebook Marketplace, or you're buying it as an individual, and whether you're looking to flip it or keep it, if it's worth any amount of money, I highly recommend a PPI, because essentially it's giving you that same thing.
What's a PPI?
So that's a pre-purchase inspection.
Okay.
There are all sorts of companies that'll do it. Some of them, I mean, you could just take the car to a mechanic and have them do it.
Right, but if you're not there,
yeah. So let's say you're buying it online,
right?
And I've done this for personal vehicles before. Basically, you call a company out there, and some of them are nationwide. I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head. And it's flat fee, a couple $100 maybe. They'll send a guy out there. They'll go run through it, list every single thing they can find wrong with the car. They'll test drive it for you.
Man, I wish I'd done that with my Rolls, the last one I bought.
It's a lifesaver.
Saved me so much grief.
Before I bought the 911, I was going to buy a Cayman, and I sent a guy out for a PPI. The guys at the dealership told me, oh, yeah, it's great. Nothing wrong with it, yada, yada, yada. You know,
right.
Me how there's no problems. And I'm like, what about that curb rash on the wheel? And they're like, oh, I didn't even notice that. And so I'm just kind of like, all right, I'm going to send someone out there.
Yeah.
They pointed out probably 25, 30 issues that were not disclosed. And I mean, they weren't incredibly major, but some of them were, you know,
sure.
They were big enough to where it was going to be very expensive to fix. And I just dropped the deal entirely right there. I was like, no.
Oh, that's good advice for people. So back on the deal here. So you and Ryan and Chris started this business. When did you start?
So we started like working on it in, I want to say July.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So.
Yeah, this year.
In July, we started work on the property and whatnot. We, you know, power washed the lot, started getting the place repainted, retiled the floors, just did a bunch of things just to kind of make it look nicer, you know, freshen everything up. And since then, we've done some other updates as well, but we didn't get opened up officially until we had to get a business license, obviously, and that was part of the only thing kind of impeding us in the beginning was the business license and getting the dealer's license transferred over to where it was also in Ryan's name.
Right.
So I think we opened in August, midway through, I would say. And our first month was actually really good, and we'd done really good at the auctions. We'd bought a lot of good cars, and I want to say month one. And bear in mind, we were paying for expenses backdating like essentially a month and a half prior, so 2.5 months of expenses. I want to say that I mean we netted pretty good profit first month. And that was, and I'm not saying it was surprising, but I mean, it was, you know, we had half a month to work with, and we more than covered our expenses.
Came out of the gate strong
and had a strong profit. So I couldn't complain there. And unfortunately, though, 2 weeks after we opened, our, you know, third business partner, Ryan, ended up passing away in a car accident. So that kind of threw everything off a little bit. We were on a good start, good roll. And, obviously everyone around us, you know, we didn't know what was going to happen, what we were going to do. And, obviously we didn't have all of the inventory that we had planned on having at that point.
Right.
So, a little bit less capital to work with. But I mean, that was at the time, obviously that was very bottom of, you know, that wasn't even in my mind, but it just, it makes it, it made it a little bit harder continuing, but we're starting to kind of get a feel for it again, and, you know, get the hang of it. But ton of people stepped in, helped us out, and, you know, gave us some guidance on the backside. So I you know, can't complain. I mean, obviously for that I can, because Ryan was a good friend of ours by that point. And
that was bad. You were the one that, in fact, you called me, I think I was at the country club that day, and you called me to tell me. I was shocked.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was obviously for everyone, just because, I mean, the guy was
so young.
Yeah.
Was so good.
31.
I mean. Such a great guy. But so now you've got the aftermath, though, of Ryan's passing, which is like not a real great LLC operating agreement.
Yeah.
Right?
So one of the things about Ryan is, I would trust the man with my life, like 100%.
No, I get it. I did too.
If we shook hands on something, if we agreed on something, I would 100% take that to heart. I would believe it.
Yeah, I understand.
And so I never really, whenever we went through our original operating agreement and everything, although it was a little confusing, a little bit vague, he kind of ran us through it, and I was, good with everything. And I actually remember reading through it with him, and there was and this isn't funny, but there was a clause for death, and he read it through it, and he was kind of explaining it to us. And I said, well, I don't plan on dying anytime soon. We all three are like, well, me either, and
right.
Just unfortunately.
It seems like it's not going to happen.
Yeah. It's, one of those things. But of course, after all this has happened, it has been a little bit hard just because our operating agreement wasn't, the LLC formation and everything wasn't super well documented, and some of the things. So it has been a little bit hard just kind of picking through that and trying to explain to, obviously, everyone involved, how things were structured originally.
Right.
It's been a little bit messy, but, we're getting all that figured out. So it's
right. But again, I mean, you go back to when, I hate to say I told you so. You've been a student of mine. How often did I hammer on these poorly drafted LLC operating agreements?
Quite a lot. Yeah. No, if I have one piece of advice, listen to Zweig. Definitely get your ducks in a row when it comes to an operating agreement. I thought it looked good, honestly, at the time, but
I'm involved with one right now that I think, thankfully, we don't have any problems now, but they did have.
Yeah.
And we're converting it to a corporation, so we've got stock that we can buy and sell and bring employees in, and it just does a whole lot of things to have that stock. Yeah. Not having everybody sign off on the LLC operating agreement. Now we got to get everybody to sign off on the fact that we're converting to a corporation.
See, maybe that's what we should do. Sell stuff.
Yeah, it's anyway. I've just seen the aftermath. It's like if you went to the dentist and he just constantly gave you candy bars every time you were there.
Yeah.
It's kind of these lawyers that do these poorly written agreements, or people get them offline where they use the last company's agreement that they had and copy it. It's just not a good way to go. Spend the money you got to spend. Get some professional advice from people who've actually done it, and not every attorney is good at this stuff.
No, absolutely.
That's another one I've always hammered on is specialization is the rule of the day. No matter what your legal needs are, find somebody who does that, and that's all they do is stuff like that.
Yeah, I do know an attorney wrote ours, but I don't. There's just a lot of details missing.
Yeah, it's common. I mean, it's a real common issue. So where are you going to go with this business, you think, next? I mean, you guys sort of have kind of a product orientation, I would say, with what you buy and sell. I see a lot of BMWs. I see a lot of Toyota Land Cruisers and vehicles like that in there.
Yeah, so we kind of have we have a bit of a niche, and that the niche is kind of carried over from our previous dealership.
And Porsches, of course. Yes. You love the Porsches.
We do like Porsches.
Who doesn't? I mean, that's, everybody likes Porsches.
If you haven't driven one and you're listening to this, I highly recommend it. It's one of those things where you don't understand it until you actually spend some time in one. I agree with you. It's a completely different car than what you would expect, or probably anything else you've driven.
And not only that, they hold their value so well, particularly if you go 911 route. I mean, I had a student of mine, and his boss bought a new 911 and drove it for 3 years, and he either got $1,000 less than he paid or $1,000 more than he paid for it after 3 years of ownership and use every day.
See, there are people that make a good living off of buying those cars new and selling them.
That's crazy.
It's wild.
So it's just the price of entry is high, but the operational cost because of depreciation is very low.
Oh yeah, no,
You know,
I mean, you hear about the flippers and stuff. If you can get into some of the specialty stuff they make, I mean, if I want to say that whenever the GT2 RS came out in 2016 or 2018, whatever year it was, they came out with the most recent one. MSRP was like $230 or something, and those cars were selling open market for $500K for.
Oh my gosh,
so, I mean,
it's insane.
It's like, I mean, you could double your money if you just bought it and sold it. The only problem was getting the piece of paper that says you can buy it.
So what do you see?
And having the money up front.
Yeah, right. What do you see as the future of the used car business?
I mean, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more EVs. I'm not sure I'm too incredibly keen on that, but
seems like the market's not all that keen on it either. The pricing is really dropping fast.
I've noticed that. I was looking.
Yeah.
I actually saw a Tesla run through auction not too long ago. Granted, it was not in good shape, but it was Model S, and it was real beat up, bear in mind, but I think it sold for $7,000.
Wow. That is cheap. Yeah.
I was
they've
enticed.
fallen a long way.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I'll see them, cars that were listed for 120 last year, and they're listed for 65, 70 now.
Holy cow.
Some of those. And I mean, part of it's just the whole used car market dropping, but
I know my wife's car has dropped perilously.
I do think that it'll start to solidify again and level off. And I think we're getting close to that point. I think everything's come down enough to where we're getting close to where we were pre all of this craziness. But of course, a used car is always a depreciating asset and that's part of the reason we like the niche stuff, because
right.
But
may not be depreciating.
Yeah, there is a certain turnaround point. After a certain amount of time, just some cars take longer than others. Like, for example, say a Honda S2000, BMW M3, Porsche 911. After 20 years, those cars are going to start coming back up.
Yeah. There's just history.
It's not gonna fall back again. I mean, you might get incremental dips here and there,
right? But the trend line is up, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, but I think as a whole, the car market's just, I don't want to say it's super unstable, but
it's volatile.
It's volatile, but I don't think that it's gonna ever just fall out. I mean, thing is, at the end of the day, I look at them as just purely physical assets, and it's going to retain some kind of value as long as it works, even just material cost. It's always going to retain some kind of value.
Right.
So
the risk is sort of lower because of that, is what you're saying.
I mean, me personally, I prefer to have cars over cash. Yeah. And I just, maybe it's a little harder. It's less liquid, but at the end of the day, with the current inflation rate, I think that my money is safer in a car that is on an appreciation curve, like an older car like that, like, say, for example, the 911.
Right.
I think it's safer there than it would be in cash.
Right.
Because cash is just going to keep, the value of the dollar is just going to keep dropping, whereas that's going to retain some kind of value. But
I understand.
Obviously, certain specific things, like the stuff that I like to buy, it's already on the way back up.
Yep. So what advice do you have for anybody who's thinking about starting a business right now?
I would say definitely if you're going to do an LLC, definitely get a very good operating agreement. Make sure that your paperwork is flawless. That's probably the biggest thing I could suggest. But also, don't be afraid to, number one. And another one, one of the big things that I've learned, that I've knew this going in, but nobody wants to work for anyone. And that was one of the things I always said when I was growing up, is I was like, I never want to have to always, I don't want to spend my whole life having to work for someone else. I want to work for myself.
Sure.
Well,
you did work for the family businesses, though, I know.
No, I've worked tons of odd jobs and done all sorts of random stuff, but I was doing DoorDash for a while. Anything I could do to scrounge up some cash. I was
You're a hustler, buddy.
Anything I could do to make some money, I'd do it. For a while I was moving stuff for people. I was doing DoorDash, Uber Eats, flipping anything I could get my hands on. I was flipping dirt bikes,
Nick was a front row student, everybody. He always sat in the front row, which is always where the best students tend to sit. I can't say I've ever had a bad student in the front row. I've had some good ones in the back row too, but yeah.
Yeah. No, but what I was going to say is what's funny is, you always say you want to work for yourself until you realize that you're the worst boss to have.
Or there's nobody to turn your notice into. That's the other problem.
Yeah, see, I had joked about that the other day. I said, man, my boss is a jerk, talking about myself, because if you start a business, you have to expect that you're responsible for everything. There's no one you can go to whenever you have a problem and say, hey, there's a problem, I need you to fix this for me.
Right.
It's like, if there's a high level problem, that's your problem, and you have to be prepared to solve that. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but I guess why I mentioned it, but I've been running car washes for my dad. I ran one of his car washes for the last like 7 or 8 years, and I started out helping out with it, and I more or less took over running it for him later on. And that is where I really learned that lesson, is just because, you'll get calls at all hours. And I mean, everyone wants to own or, manage their own business or whatnot, but you have to understand that if you want to do that,
on, baby.
you have to, you're always on call. There's never really a full day off unless, I don't know, you're gone and you have someone else to take care of that. But I mean, it's never going to be the same either. Right. You never trust anyone the way that you trust yourself either.
No, I understand. It takes a while to build up that kind of talent, and you got to have a certain scale of a business to get there. But yeah, it's possible.
And that's been kind of another hurdle in the last 2 months or so. Because we didn't open that long ago. And about a month after Ryan passed away, my dad actually had a really bad stroke, and
I know.
He was in the hospital and rehab for about 2 months, I'd say. And he's still not walking or anything like that, but he's improved vastly. But because of that, he was running the Springdale location, and because of the dealership, I was dialing back a lot on working at the car washes. We'd hired someone to help out a little more, and I had him more or less stepping in for me a lot. And I mean, I'd still show up there usually once a day, but not for very long, just to check everything out and make sure it looked good. But because of that, I more or less had to take over everything he was doing over there, because he's been in bed and he hasn't been able to do that. So
that's kind of
I've been juggling a little bit, trying to because I'm running both locations now, and before he would order this stuff, and anytime there was a major problem, call people or whatnot, and so that's kind of all fallen onto me, and so I'm sorting it out, but it's definitely been a bit of a hurdle, and you just can't always expect everything to go the way you expect it to. I mean,
no
you
kidding.
can never
bad stuff
happens.
Anything.
And
bad stuff happens, and you've got to step in.
And it usually happens at the same time. It's just the way that it tends to go. It's like if one bad thing happens, you better watch yourself. And it's funny because my dad said that very thing to me after Ryan passed away. He's like,
really?
It's like, you better watch out, because these they come in threes. Huh? So
that's crazy. So how many hours a week are you working? Are you just basically working 7 days a week now?
Well,
all the time?
So basically, I've always worked 7 days a week, but it's the hours that are kind of varied. But that being said, so I get up and go to the dealership, and this is just Monday through Saturday. I get up, I go to the dealership. I work there till 6, 7 maybe, and then I usually go and try to do some kind of rehab stuff with my dad. Try to help him with exercise, and try to get
sure.
And then after that, I'll go to the car wash, or sometimes before the dealership. And a lot of times I have to leave during the day at the dealership and go between the car washes and kind of check on them. But not including, helping him out, because obviously that's not like work for the businesses by any means. But I've had to kind of dial back a little bit of the time I'm spending there, just because I do have to help out with them too.
Sure.
With my dad.
You're a good son.
I appreciate that. But It's a bit much, but I'm getting the handle on it. I usually get home at night like 9 or 10 though, and then so at that point I'm just ready to crash.
Are you dating anybody now?
No, not currently.
I was gonna say, I wondered how that was going with this kind of work. I mean, it's got to put a strain on that.
It's
doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes it a little bit hard to find the time for it, for sure. Yeah. I do have Sundays off for the dealership though. I mean, off being not, open. Sometimes I still sell or show cars on Sunday and I'm still over there, getting things done. Sure. But, or just the online stuff, just shopping for them and things like that. But I try to spend as little time there on Sundays as I can because and that's kind of my catch-up day at the car washes too. So realistically, it's not really a day off. It's just a transfer of where that work is going to.
Yeah.
But sometimes I could find a couple hours to squeeze in, go do something fun, hang out with a friend, whatever.
It's a lot of work though. I mean, this is what people need to know.
It's definitely, and I mean, when we first started out, I mean, it was just pure 12, 14-hour days. I mean, relentlessly. And I mean, granted, not that I'm not still doing that to a certain degree. It's just, it's transferred where that's going. And it feels like less work whenever you're in different places.
Yeah.
So it's like, you wake up and you go to one place and you move to another. I'd much rather do that than be stuck at the same building working at the same spot all day long.
I understand.
But it also gets a little exhausting because, I'm running Farmington, Springdale, Fayetteville, and then just back and forth. Mm-hmm. And it seems like every time you leave one of those places, I think it was Tuesday, I left the Springdale car wash and I just fixed a door, which it's a huge pain. I mean, it's it's one of those overhead doors and it's a roll-up door. And we had an issue with the pole essentially sliding out of the gearbox, and it's just the place you stand is a pole. It's because you can't get a ladder in there. You have to stand on this vertical pole on top of the pole to actually service this, and you have to hold the tension while you're pulling everything over. And I can't really explain it without visuals, but it is the most obnoxiously difficult thing that I have had to service there, and I've had to do it 3 times. But it's essentially, I had just left from doing that, and I had just gotten all the way back to the dealership, and I was over there, and I get a phone call, and the guy's like, "Hey, there's a problem over here. This thing's taking money, and it's not giving any time, and sometimes these machines are so complicated, or people spray the bill acceptors or something, and just glitches it out." And so I went over there, reset it and whatnot, but I was just like, man, I just left here.
Right.
Literally 5 minutes ago. I mean, not 5 minutes at this point because I'd already driven back, but maybe 15. So
that's the life of the small business owner, and the multi-small business owner just compounds it.
Yeah, it's it's good fun.
But you guys are able to carry everything on in your dad's absence right now. How,
I'm doing my best. I'm certainly behind on fixing certain things, mostly because I've just been crammed at the dealership. I mean, I'll be stuck there, and I need to make phone calls to people before a certain time to get things ordered, or they'll send me the wrong part or something, or just wire connections, whatever it may be. Something's wrong, and it's just I gotta make these calls, or at least get out there and go repair this stuff. And some of it is really hard to do by yourself too. Some of it I need another person, and we do have another guy who helps out at one of them. And I mean, we do have a couple people to help out at Springdale, but I only have one for Farmington. And my Farmington guy, he's got another job too, because obviously I can't employ him full time there. It wouldn't make sense. So it's a little hard to sometimes get the 2-man jobs done whenever you both are working outside of that, and it's different hours, so it's difficult to balance. But I'm certain that within the next year or two I'll have it balanced out a little better. At some point I'll find out about a work-life balance.
I'm not sure that Eric and I have talked about that a lot on the show, and we're big advocates of work-life integration.
Yeah.
Because the balance is going to be impossible to achieve, it seems. And the work should be something that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Which I know you, for the most part, do. That's your nature. But yeah, Nick, I don't worry about you because you. Oh. I'm sorry, my phone is asking or my watch is asking questions. But no, I don't worry about you because you are a hard worker, and I know you're a really conscientious guy and you care. And I just have to believe that if you have those two characteristics, those are going to serve you very well. You know,
I appreciate that.
You're used to it. You're used to working hard. You always have, and you're going to get through this. And at the same time, you're demonstrating that you're a good son and you're helping out your mom and dad, and you get to work with your brother, and that's nice. You know,
definitely. I mean, it's cool getting to work with him because I mean, you know, it's just I've always looked up to Chris. You know, he was always growing up. He was always very, you know, savvy with that kind of stuff, like just getting stuff flipped or whatnot.
He seems like he maintains his composure really well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So that's always a nice characteristic to have if you're under fire, to be able to stay calm.
Yeah. And no, it's funny. Chris and I are the we have our strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
I'll say that anytime there's a confrontational situation, that's me. I got to step in for that. And weirdly enough, they seem to happen more than you would think in any of these businesses. People, it's the funny thing. Also, another piece of advice with any small business is that people will get unreasonably mad over small things. Yeah. It's like, and you have to know how to de-escalate that.
Sure.
And when necessary, I mean, I always try to make people happy, but you know, it's you can't always win.
Sometimes you can't make them happy.
You can't win every battle with that, but I do try.
Yes.
So people will get unreasonably angry, and, you know, you just got to find ways to de-escalate it and, you know, calm them down. And I've had plenty of situations where people come in real hot, and I'm like, dude, I just want to make it right. That's all I want to do. And usually most reasonable people will kind of, you know, calm down, and they usually leave happy. You know, I give something extra for whatever it was that was an issue.
It's always my philosophy too.
Yeah.
Solve their problem and give them something extra.
Yeah. I mean, like,
you know,
say for example, at the car washes, anytime that there's a problem or someone, you know, sometimes if someone goes through a wash and the next person's already paid for a wash, that person might back up all the way and they'll run over the paddles again, and it'll just think that it's washing a car, and it'll run the whole wash again, but they'll just be taking the other person's wash, and then someone will call me and they'll be all mad, it didn't give me a wash. And I'm like, did someone back up in front of you? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, look, I'll be out there in 5, you know, just zoom over there, and, you know, I'll get them their wash, and I'll give them an extra one or something, you know, I'll give them a coupon for free $12 wash or whatever, just anything. Or if they're not there, they can't be there, I'll mail it to them. But, you know, I always want to make everything right, which it always kind of cracks me up anytime I see like a bad review or something. I'll like message them on the review, and I'm like, hey, you know, give me a call, I'll get you taken care of. And like I one time I saw a bad review from someone I knew from high school and I used to be friends with, and I was like, I messaged them on there, and then I called them, and they just didn't even, they just completely ignored me. Like, I shot them a text and they just ignored it, and I was like, dude, I just want to make it right. I appreciate you pointing that out. There was a problem there. I got it fixed. I wouldn't have known if you hadn't told me. And so I want to do something for you, and they just didn't respond. I was like, okay.
Well, sometimes people aren't as good as they should be, but
it's all part of it. You know, you gotta. You anytime you do own a small business, you have to be prepared for all of the eventualities, because anything can happen. I mean, I think
it probably will.
Yeah, the very first car we sold, we actually there was a lien at some point back in 2008, and the lien was had already been paid off, obviously, years ago. And any cars that go through the auction, they can't have a lien on them. That's like one of their policies. So it shouldn't be a lien to begin with. Well, sorry, I had to clear my throat. The guy who bought it had to take it to register it, but he waited 2 months to register it. And so after he registers the car, we get a call, and very, very upset call about there being a lien on the car. And so I said, I'll get that taken care of. There shouldn't be a lien. There's no reason for there to be. And so we call the, they end up showing up to the dealership. Yeah. We called the DMV. We called the bank that had the lien on it. We got balls rolling on that, but the bank is slow.
Sure.
We just needed a document that said they had no interest in it. And it ended up taking like 3 or 4 days. We gave him a dealer tag to run on the car in the meantime, and whatever we could do to help. But the whole time, they were so mad. Like, I mean, the threatening to sue us, coming in screaming at us. I'm like, all right. And the guy was just like, I acknowledge this isn't your fault, but since you're the one that sold it to me, you're the one I'm going after. And I'm like,
great. That was your first one out of the gate. Huh?
Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh. And we ended up getting him sorted out. It's funny because he told me he was going to drop it off and, demand his money back the day that we ended up getting the document in. He said, if I don't have it by today. And then they called me and they're like, yeah, we got it. They faxed it to us. We had it ready for him. He didn't pick it up that day. He picked it up the next day. And so I had a good laugh out of that. I was like, man, for someone who's so impatient, you'd think he'd show up the same day.
Right.
And when he came and picked it up, he's like, oh, I didn't really mean any of that. I just wanted to...
Well, people get upset.
Yeah.
No doubt.
I just wanted to get you moving on it. I'm like, dude, I had it moving on the second you called me initially.
Sure.
The only reason that we got this today is because of that date.
Right.
It took them a while to process it, essentially, because the bank, they don't care. I mean,
sure,
it's some bank in California. We have no
connection with them. Yeah.
I mean, the only reason there was a problem is because the state of Oklahoma never got the documentation. The document was, if they'd registered in Arkansas, it wouldn't have been a problem.
Yeah.
But just Oklahoma's, their system is not up to date with some stuff.
Sure.
But it's wild. I have fun with it, though. I like cars, so, getting to drive and work on these things and, fix them up and eventually sell them to someone who, and I love selling stuff to people when they're excited about it.
Yeah.
That's my favorite, is whenever, someone's actually excited to buy it. And that's why I like to sell stuff that I think is fun, because I like to see other people kind of, get that enjoyment out of it too.
Hey, I bought a used car from you and I didn't even need it. So, I would, if you're here locally, check these guys out at Market Auto. And what's your website, Nick?
It's marketautoar.com.
Marketautoar.com. So, Nick, I really appreciate you being here today.
I appreciate you having me on. As
busy as you are. Hopefully, our listeners got some good insight from you. So that's what we're all about here at Big Talk About Small Business. So in any case, I hope everybody has a great holiday coming up here. As we record this, we are, 3 days away from Christmas. So I hope that goes well for those of you and you don't find it too stressful and you can actually find some time to settle down and appreciate what you have and ponder all the good blessings that we're all graced with here. And we will see you again next week on another episode of Big Talk About Small Business. Thanks again.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Big Talk About Small Business. If you have any questions or ideas for upcoming shows, be sure to head over to our website, www.bigtalkaboutsmallbusiness.com, and click on the Ask the Host button for the chance to have your questions answered on the show. Stay connected with us on LinkedIn at Big Talk About Small Business. And be sure to head over to our website to read articles, browse episodes, and ask questions about upcoming shows.